Welcome to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws, the podcast that cuts through the rubbish to explore the world of neurodiversity. I'm your host, Nic King.
And I'm your host, Kate Fox, and together we're here to explore, understand and celebrate being neurodivergent in a neurotypical world. From ADHD and autism to dyslexia and other quirky brains, we talk about it all.
And go off on tangents. So whether you're neurodivergent, love someone who is, or you're just curious about neurodivergent minds, you are in the right place.
Let's get ready to juggle some words and maybe even a few chainsaws, metaphorically, of course.
Hello, welcome back to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws. And this week's topic might be slightly controversial, but we're doing it anyway.
Yes. Is this why we've not done it earlier? That is, we being me, Kate Fox, stand-up poet extraordinaire, and Nic King, creator of the NeuroBears Neuro-Affirming courses for young people. Have we not done this earlier because it's slightly controversial?
No. I feel like it's been on the list for a while. I do. I feel like it's been on the list for a while, but some podcasts just need a little bit warming up to. But we don't need to warm up to these people because today we are doing You Can Be Autistic and Be an Arsehole. There we go. I said it. And you can.
You can. And I mean, that's quite hard because I spend personally a lot of time going, autistic people are the best people. Why isn't everyone us? Look at us here talking interestingly and rationally and not gaslighting people and stuff. Autistic people are the best. But I must confess that, yes, the shadow flip side of this is autistic people can be arseholes and knobheads.
Yes. I think it comes from sort of a historic infantilization. I think it comes from this idea that we are childlike, we are innocents, we don't understand what we're doing, we don't mean it, it's your interpretation of it. And sometimes that's true, and sometimes it's not. And just because we're autistic doesn't mean that we shouldn't be accountable for our behaviour or reflective of our behaviour, particularly if it's hurting other people.
Yeah, agree. And actually, so first of all, that pings for me in a certain particular way. And I'm thinking of a time where it was actually more likely straight after diagnosis, actually, where I was coming to terms with my identity. And I definitely went through a phase of, I have belated permission to be an asshole because I've held it in for a long time. And I'm autistic, actually. And I think you'll find just. However, so let us return to that type of thing because I don't want to evade accountability. But is there anything in the news, Nic? Is there anyone in the news that might have reminded us about how autistic people can be assholes?
What, like Elon Musk or Greg Wallace, or pick some? Pick
Exactly.
some. In fact, we've got a selection at the minute, haven't we?
We have, yes. I suppose Elon Musk is shining out particularly brightly because of his role in assisting with a fascist coup in the US, which is making him quite noticeable on our radar.
I mean, Roman salutes are fairly noticeable as things. That was not a Roman salute by any stretch of the imagination, but I'm never going to get away with saying the Nazi one and staying on Spotify. So let's go with that.
What a tangle, what the tangled web of, and actually I think we will have to restrain ourselves a little bit around, because we could do a whole podcast on Elon Musk and reactions to him.
Yes.
And probably we don't want to get too tangled up in just the rabbit hole of him. But that simultaneously, on the one hand, some people are saying, for example, around the Nazi salute, oh, well, he's autistic.
Mm-hmm.
Get confused. And then some people are saying that is no excuse. Meanwhile, policy in America for autistic people, with Robert F. Kennedy Jr. as health secretary. Secretary's not the right thing, is it? Anyway, whatever he is, in charge of health. who has made some horrendous statements about autism and autistic people, all happening while Elon Musk is being, it's, yeah, it's a lot.
Yeah.
But in summary, Elon Musk is an asshole. No, sorry, what beyond that? React, well,
I think my issue fundamentally flows into somebody has done something awful, horrific, and then a bunch of people, it's not even always them, is it? It's their mates that come out and go, oh, but they're probably, or they are autistic. Not that I think Greg Wallace nor Elon Musk actually has an official diagnosis that I know of. Not the point. Um, but like that's the thing. Like he didn't mean what he said. If we're going back into Greg Wallace, it was he didn't mean, he didn't understand. But no, no, we do understand.
and can we, in fact, name it? There is a particular unfortunate collision between a certain type of toxic masculinity, a certain type of entitled masculinity, which some sections of society encourage, and I mean, it impacts on all men. It impacts on some autistic men in a particular way, as in two things are happening together. Could we argue that they're just examples of toxic masculinity? I'm also thinking of Neil Gaiman, by the way, where there's a very complex, he has long been a kind of avatar of a sort of geeky eccentricness and being autistic, by not necessarily overtly spoken about as that, but essentially, um, he is. Um, and we've got him in a situation where there are many sexual abuse allegations against him, and some of the defence is, but he's autistic and he didn't know. And again, that's no defence, is it? What was actually happening was he was expressing toxic masculinity in a particular way.
Exactly. And there's a lot of that sort of thing about as well, isn't there? So that the women's football case has just gone through court recently, and he's been found guilty, and it's still he was excited. Like even like there's always an excuse, isn't there, for that kind of thing. And I definitely don't want to get onto men because I'm aware of plenty autistic women who have also been dicks. Not necessarily famous ones, but like in my personal life, you're like, ooh, okay. You can take your toxicity and or your trauma elsewhere.
Because ultimately, everybody then, okay, I'm going to talk about me because this feels, I'm going to talk about me. Who knew?
Who hates being an asshole? That's not where we're going.
Yeah, but the thing, the moment, as I say, I think my peak asshole time was shortly after diagnosis,
Hmm.
uh, where I did. So I know I'll have to provide some concrete examples, but I think in a cafe once, actually, there was, I can't, I hope it wasn't quite just this, but it could have been this. It was something like I had asked for creme fraiche and they brought salad cream. It was something as trivial as that.
Right.
And it wasn't that was not the problem, although maybe it was a problem in itself. Maybe that hyped me up a bit. Um, but the way that when I asked about that to the waitress, I think I perceived them as in some way kind of lying about it. So lying for me is a particular, it's kryptonite. It's absolute kryptonite, as is being sold something. Um, and I essentially had a meltdown. No, I don't think it was a meltdown. I think it was a tantrum. There's an important distinction. Often what is a meltdown is mistaken for a tantrum. In this case, I would say it was. It was as if I decided that I did have a pent up amount of unexpressed anger. And now I was allowed to express it. I was perfectly justified in expressing it because I'm autistic. And apparently, being autistic means that you cannot regulate your emotions. I went off on some kind of loop around that. And I made a very public scene and was never able to go in that particular cafe ever again. And essentially, I suppose for a little while after that, I would still have believed that it was okay to sometimes take my frustrations out on service staff. Like that was not an isolated incident. Probably what happened for about across a period of 18 months, there was more than one thing like that. And then to cut a long story short, I sort of came to terms more with what my diagnosis actually meant, got much more in touch with sort of basic uh, treat people nicely, be kind, don't be emotionally or verbally abusive. All these things are bad. Like I kind of already knew that before and somehow conveniently decided to unlearn it at some level temporarily. And now, fortified by Buddhist teachings, meditation, a lot of reading of Instagram, I'm back on board. Back on board, baby. I am kind to people on the whole, if I possibly can be, and if I'm not, then I would generally regard it as somewhat of a failure.
Oh, there we go. It's a lot of pressure. I think I have a very direct communication style. And people who know me well will know the difference between my communication style when I am being paid to communicate in a certain way, which is slightly fluffier than my natural communication style, and when I'm not being paid. It's not work. But even just this morning, so this morning I had to drop my youngest human off and I had to get back quickly because there's been a change in my eldest state and I had to get back in the house. And I actually had to be two places at once simultaneously, which isn't even possible. But I had something I had to communicate to setting one, and I wasn't able to do that immediately at drop off and I had to leave. And I just said, I'm going to DM you what I need to tell you. And the person that had sort of been talking fluffy talk, the other parent that was there was like, oh my God, you can do it now. And like in that moment, I wasn't having a go at them at all. I was delivering a fact because I had a fact that I had to deliver. I was unable to deliver it. I had to leave. And I just did some very direct communication. And I know other people will have taken that experience badly, but it's not the intent. And there was no harm served at all. It was just a delivery of information that some people might have liked in a slightly fluffier way, or they might have liked me to have more time and more patience, but I didn't have it available this morning. Like literally didn't have it available this morning. I came back and the other person in setting two, which was my home this morning, was waiting to come into my house because for safeguarding issues, they couldn't be in my house unless I was there because it was only my young person in the house. So like I literally had to be in two places at once this morning and had two people to deliver information to, and had I managed to do that easily first thing at drop off, that would have happened well, but that isn't how life was. And yeah, so I'm sort of aware that some people experience me very directly and don't necessarily appreciate that. But I'm also aware that some people experience me very directly and do really appreciate that. And there's a level where that's kind of slightly about them.
Want to help keep our podcast going strong, a bit like my coffee? You can leave a tip via our PayPal link on our website, Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws, and your support keeps everything running smoothly, again like my coffee, and we couldn't do it without you.
Yes, and actually, there's a nuance and a distinction here, then, isn't there? And this is why partly why this is a controversial topic in all sorts of ways. Was actually there's being an asshole and being perceived as one,
Yes.
perhaps. And again, yes, it's objective. What is being an asshole? But perhaps it's objective as to whether you actually were or not. In that instance, that does not sound like you were being so. But
Certainly not actively seeking to be so. And there is a difference between doing things that you know are inherently wrong to people and doing things because of circumstances, trauma, stress, spoons, burnout, pick one, like monotropism, double empathy problems. There's a long list. There is a long list of why we can be perceived as being an arsehole, but that doesn't exclude we're from actively being arseholes either.
maybe processes of kind of self-reflection are important and kind of going, well, I was an asshole in that situation. I suppose it sounds upon reflection, you're just realizing that you were direct, maybe more direct than you might have been were you not pressured to be in two places at once.
Yeah.
And there it is, and therefore you do adjust your communication in circumstances when you have more spoons. Reflection and accountability when it turns out perhaps, so if someone has been an arsehole, maybe they have caused upset to someone else and didn't intend to, and it doesn't feel that that person is completely deluded as to a degree of upset, then perhaps one can, apologize or repair the situation. It's still different, isn't it, to being an asshole? But then I'm thinking, okay, is this more controversial? Like, I how do I put this? I grew up in a home where there was quite a modelling of knobheadish behaviour within the home.
Mm.
One very useful antidote to this was that I read Enid Blyton books. Enid Blyton books model positive behaviour and accountability. I just spent time in books, basically. And at school, they're always going, be nice to each other and stuff. Excellent, a good antidote to what I was receiving in my direct environment. But I do think that, given that I am autistic, my response to these inputs, well, it's like receiving a lot of mixed messages. And what I internalized, and in fact, what many of us internalize, and this is very complicated, is a lot of self-criticism, really. And in fact, that's for many of us, isn't it? When we're neurodivergent in a neurotypical world and we're aware that often we're doing things differently to other people. And so we go, I am wrong. I'm the one who is wrong. And stuff gets internalized while we're trying to learn the rules. Someone did theorize to me quite recently, massive gender generalization, but perhaps men are more likely often to externalize some of that self-criticism stuff and it comes out outwardly. Women are more likely to internalize it and it comes out in the form of self-harm and self-criticism. Again, that's far too much of a gender generalization, but I think there is an element of, certainly some of us do stuff inside, and for others of us it comes out outside.
Yes, I think there are definitely some of us that worry about our social interactions far more than others, and need more support and reassurance in their communication style to feel like they are being perceived in a positive manner. I
Yeah.
actually struggle with people like that because I'm not very good at praise.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I'm
actually,
not.
if somebody's going, please tell me that I did all right. Tell me I'm not. Well, tell you what, sorry if you're listening and this is you, but it's really hard work to deal with someone who needs constant reassurance that they're doing all right.
Yeah.
And I haven't always got this. I
Haven't
think
all got-
quite a reassuring person in lots of ways when I have the spoons and the patience to be that. And otherwise, it's like, oh, this is another energy drain. Someone who
Yeah, yeah.
it really struggling, but actually, I was going to say therapy is available. It isn't always actually. It's a
Not the
trouble.
correct one anyway. Not the
No,
correct one with the correct people at the correct time in the correct way
no,
at all.
no. It's, to be honest, it's much more comforting around this complex topic to just return to Elon Musk is an asshole. Honestly, like it is, and
I mean, he is. I think the other danger as well. Can I talk about him? I think it's public. It is public. He went to court. Um, there was an autistic person that came up in our local area, started a CIC like many people do, started, showing up to all the community type meetings and events and this, that, and the other. And he immediately set off my radar. He immediately red flagged all over everything. And I was sitting there and I had nothing on him. I had nothing no personal negative experiences of him. But I was just sitting there like, ugh, don't. You're not sitting well with me. Um, but like everyone I sort of flagged him to was like, oh, well, he's autistic. And I'm like, yes, I'm aware. And like, that's just how he is. And I'm like, yeah, but have we looked at his behavior? And they're like, yes, but he's autistic. And I'm like, yeah. And I think it's about sort of 2 years later, it came to light that he had an entirely different name, an entirely different identity, and he'd been done for paedophilia quite recently.
So your spidey senses had
My spidey senses went off.
picked something off, but actually other people externally are saying, yes, but autistic, this explains every possible thing in the world. And actually, but here's the thing. Okay, so we know that a lot of neurotypical people will interact with an autistic person and their spidey senses will be saying something's off. What the spidey senses are saying is, this person has been on a different neurodevelopmental track to me and perceives and processes the world and communicates it in different ways in their body minds. That's what they're perceiving. But what we still have is a kind of an off.
Yeah.
So again, that seems to come back down in favour of attempting to resolve the double empathy problem as far as possible, recognising that people across neurotypes may sometimes differ in their ways of communicating and need to understand each other more. But in social situations, being aware of what behavioural red flags actually
Are actually red flags.
yeah,
Yeah.
And what I mean, someone has just I don't think anyone involved will listen to this podcast, so I can say this. So, someone has just been telling me about a builder who did some work for them on their house, and the response of their builder when they said that something was wrong was absolutely full of gaslighting and triangulation and defensive behaviour. It was absolutely chaotic, and just one instance of how that builder was communicating to me would have been a red flag of this person is not an emotionally safe person, and it doesn't matter nothing else around. But
Neurotype's not coming into it. Yeah.
exactly, it was the red flag was in that type of essentially abusive communication.
Mhm.
And because I have become, did I just ping? Sorry if I just pinged. Oh, I didn't just ping. Now I've drawn attention to it and gone on about pinging, and we didn't hear any pings. Anyway, think of that ping that we didn't hear as a red flag symbolically. I suppose if we get better at just spotting generally micro and macro moments of abusive behaviour, which often we can see, I think,
Often
especially.
they're very, very clear and very out there. And I think people dismiss them as that's just how they are. Even if we think outside of autism, we go Gino Campo, who I don't think is claiming any kind of neurotype. There was obviously years and years and years of that's just how he is. That's how he behaves. That's just. And he was obviously very, very open. Like, Jimmy Savile was very, very open about his behavior. He literally told you what he was doing. And people were like, no, it's just.
Yes, I will. Another TV presenter who I won't name, but I'm fairly sure he was publicly tried actually for sexual assault, but I'm not sure enough in the moment that he was actually convicted. I think he was. Anyway, this bloke, I went on his kind of chat show at the Edinburgh Fringe Festival about 15 years ago, and the person who was doing my press was in front of him as we were walking up some stairs, and he pinched her bottom. Bear in mind, it was 2010, it wasn't even 1973. And she kind of laughed it off, but we talked about it after. We were like, whoa. And we both were fully aware there was a ticking clock on that man's behaviour, because all it took was one instance of very inappropriate, clearly abusive behaviour that actually we didn't call out further at that time, for better or for worse. And indeed, the ticking clock ran down, and there were many other instances that came to light of his behaviour, and then a trial. So, yes.
And I
So,
think communities have that as well. I actually often use that as a yardstick, when like new people pop up, they've just been diagnosed and they're desperate to write a Substack. No offense, Kate.
Nice Substack, by the way. Do you know, when I once mentioned it on the podcast, people actually started following it. So when we do it again, bigger on the inside. It's excellent, written from the point of view of not an arsehole, brackets. Sorry, carry on, Nick.
Yeah, so like they've just been diagnosed, they've just figured themselves out, they've created some sort of CIC or something, I don't know. But often I regularly judge them by the people who they go and find and hang out with, because like every community and every minority community, there are WhatsApp groups where we talk and share information about people who behave inappropriately or questionably, or people who have had bad experiences with other people, like many, many minority groups. And then I'm like, oh, you're very new to the community, aren't you? And you don't know. And then, yeah, and it gets difficult, doesn't it? Because you just, these things often take years, decades, or more to come to light.
And many of us, as autistic and ADHD people, actually, although we might be great at pattern recognition, we might have great spidey senses often, but they have often been invalidated, so we don't trust them. There is a great tendency among many of us to take people at face value, to believe them. That's why so many women in particular end up in abusive relationships, or kind of getting strung along, in which case it can take a long time for someone actually displaying abusive behaviours but saying they are not, more your classic gaslighter really, to be spotted. I suppose communities are important in that case, because one person might be taken in, and there's often people around abusers collect. Who do they collect? They collect empaths. They collect the nice people who go, oh, they're lovely, really, give everyone a chance. That's also who is around abusive people.
Yeah, absolutely. People who are very, very willing to put themselves on the line for them, often very publicly.
I want to go just as a resource flagging, because I think it can't be talked about enough. I think the work that Amy Pearson did for Durham University on the guide to relationships for autistic people is really, it's a hugely, there's a kind of easy read version of that guide and there's a longer read version. I found both of them very helpful as someone who myself has been in abusive relationships in the past, just to have some very simple, so it's almost now, I was going to say, it's almost a special interest now for me of spotting an abuser. So I think it's less likely that that would happen to me in future. Never say never, touch wood. Oh God. Anyway, but I found that guide extremely helpful and wish I'd had it a long time before.
And if you're looking for episodes, Amy is on the podcast on the 10th of April and the 24th of April talking about relationships and that difference about safety in relationships. So go out, try not to be actively an arsehole. If you know that you don't have enough spoons,
give
please
yourself
be reflective and possibly say sorry.
Yes. And on the, I would actually like to circle back though to where we began. In my experience, generally, on the whole, the nicest, most caring about justice,
Yeah.
most open, most interesting people really are my autistic friends and fellow tribes people.
And every community has one, and some of them have several. Thanks for tuning in to Neurotypicals Don't Juggle Chainsaws. We're so glad you joined us today to explore the fascinating world of neurodivergence with your hosts, me, Nic King.
And me, Kate Fox. If our conversation sparked a thought, a question, or even a smile, don't keep it to yourself. Drop us a line at hello@neurotypicalsdon'tjugglechainsaws.co.uk or visit our website neurotypicalsdon'tjugglechainsaws.co.uk to write in. We'd love to hear from you.
If you enjoyed today's episode, consider leaving us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast platform.
Until next time, keep embracing the unique ways you juggle the chainsaws of life.